Hey everybody, Thomas Vanderkin here from founder of Autism Staffing Group. Super excited. Thanks everybody for looking forward to this. I know I've heard a lot about it. I've talked about Eric on some of the other live streams I've done kind of leading up to this. So we've got Eric Chessen with us, the founder of Autism Fitness. How are you doing, Eric?
Doing great. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, so we're going to get into a lot of topics today. I've been watching some of your videos, really inspiring to see you just out there working with these athletes and what you're accomplishing. But maybe to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about Autism Fitness?
Yeah. So I started about 20 years ago. Uh, it, in the beginning as a personal trainer, working a little bit with general population, and I was in a behavior science program in graduate school, and I had a classmate who said, "Hey, I know you're a personal trainer. You're in this behavior science program. We're looking for somebody to come in and work within our program." This was back when I was in New York. Program in Manhattan, small little research program with teenagers on the autism spectrum. They had never had a comprehensive, or taking back from comprehensive, they had never had anything like a general fitness program. They had tried some sports-based programs, nothing really stuck. So once I came on board with that program, I started developing general fitness programs for teenagers on the spectrum, and found that the more I searched, the less I found as far as what would be a standard protocol or best practices. And so because I had this interdisciplinary model at my disposal, the exercise science side of things, and then the behavior science side of things and best practices both, I was able to start bridging the gap a little bit, but it was sheerly by my background and also out of necessity. It's like, okay, well, how do you get someone who may not be sufficiently motivated and may not have the kinesthetic awareness to squat? How do you get them to press? How do you get them to do any of these basic, what we would consider basic motor patterns that are inherent to activities of daily living, but we don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to coach it the same exact way that we would with the neurotypical population. So that's where I started about 20 years ago. And from there, it was, working with more and more and subsequently diverse athletes, and then developing a methodology out of it. Again, not necessarily because I thought, I'm going to build this, whole autism fitness thing, but because I needed to use it with my own athletes. Like, how do I do what I do and replicate it?
I think there's probably a general issue with the lack of fitness in the U.S. In general, but is it a bigger issue that you're addressing with in the autistic community, or is it just it takes a different skill set, or how is what you're doing different than general lack of fitness in the rest of the population?
I would say it's unequivocally more challenging, and one that I embrace too. You can look at these things, and oftentimes I think about from different perspectives. You can think about it socially, you can think about it culturally, you can think about it socioeconomically, and in speaking to each of those, you think about it socially. How often do we prioritize fitness in mainstream US, or how accessible is good, is good fitness? Information is readily accessible if we're looking at fitness. In fact, I think there's an overabundance of fitness information out there, and more fitness programs, more gyms, more accessibility, even to equipment. You can build a pretty functional home gym for very little, a couple of resistance bands, a couple of weights, whatever. And then you have this information where now, through particularly social media, there's so much fitness information. Well, but then you look at the American population and how we're looking with respect to what we have as information and then what people are actually acting on. So if we look at information versus action and how people are prioritizing fitness in their lives, we have a segment of the population that's, highly active, highly fit, and that takes up a small piece of that whole pie. The pie analogy, not used ironically here, but just as a point of reference. And then you can look at it. So that's the kind of the macro look at it, like general population. Okay, now let's look at this with respect to the autism population. You have a couple of challenges there. Number one, it's typically not the individual with autism who's looking for these programs. And I do work with a number of highly, capable, independent self-advocates, and that's a little bit different. But 98 to 99.4% of the time, I'm making those numbers up, it's going to be a parent or a family member seeking out those services for that individual because they're not necessarily either inherently motivated or capable to seek out fitness programming for themselves. So then you have this secondary barrier of it needs to be an advocate for that individual as opposed to that individual seeking it out themselves. Someone says, oh, I want to do metabolic training, or I want to do I want to build muscle, lose fat, all the usual stuff. I'm going to go find a trainer. Or I'm going to go find a program. I'm going to go find a gym. I'm going to download an app. Here you have that second layer of it's typically not that individual who's receiving the training or receiving that service. It's a secondary party, the family advocating or seeking that out.
Yes. So I'm also at the same time thinking about your history. You said 20 years ago you were in New York, you had this idea, and now you have Autism Fitness, which you're going to tell us more about, but it's you doing training, it's you doing programs, you training, how did you get from kind of like, hey, this is a need, to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as I started working with more and more athletes, and I'll get that out of the way too right now, because oftentimes it becomes a you're working with sports specific athletes in the realm of autism fitness. And I don't like to get too boggled down or dogmatic with terminology, but it helps. We refer to the individuals who we serve, whether it's myself or our Autism Fitness certified pros, as our athletes, because I don't like the term client. And then, my definition for that is you don't necessarily need to be sports specific, particularly competitive sports, in order to be an athlete. So we look at it and we have our life skill athletes. So if you're moving on a regular basis, getting stronger, movement patterns are improving, then we consider you an athlete. And I think there's a bit of empowerment, not only for the individual themselves, but also for the coach and for the family too. How often do they get referred to as an athlete in a proper context? So with my athletes that I was working with one-to-one in a variety of different environments too, I was doing a lot of in-home, I was doing clinical, I was working occasionally in some gym facilities, and then some dedicated autism spaces. As I continued working with methodology a little bit farther to say, okay, I have this thing called the PAC profile, and we can talk about that later. But I started writing about it, started doing some videos, eventually doing some public speaking on it and doing conferences. And I remember I was at one conference, and this is, in the early stages too, they said, well, you're presenting on fitness, but, we can't really put you with medical, and you're not really with behavioral. So we're putting you in alternative therapies. And I laughed. I thought, wow, alternative to what? Like not moving? I guess it's the alternative to sitting around. And we know where that leads to. So from there, I had, as with many things in the fitness world. Yeah. Hold on one second, Thomas. I just need to move my space here.
You're getting bumped. Okay.
Yeah, getting bumped. So from there, that's all right. We're going to take a walk. So from there, Uh, um, I Henry go out here. All right, we good? We're good. All right, this is actually more quiet. So from there, I came. Do you have a certificate? Because that's the question that always rises up in the fitness industry. So
Yeah.
I started developing the Autism Fitness certification about 8 years ago, and
Okay.
it's a cross section of professionals and parents who go through the certification program. So I have BCBAs or behavior therapists. I have occupational and physical therapists, a lot of adapted PE professionals, some fitness trainers as well, and then recreation therapists. It's cool because I get to have this intersection of all these different professionals and family members who are working with or caring for the population.
Well, and as I looked at your website, there's different levels of certification, right? Depending
Mhm.
on what you want to,
Yeah,
as if you're a parent as opposed to a,
yeah,
a coach or a different teacher, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, the level one is all the foundational information, and it gives someone all of the concepts and strategies so that they can run a program, whether they're working one-to-one or groups. The level two, I love because it's more experiential. So once someone is level one certified and they're running programs, whether they're one-to-one programs or group programs, level two, which the prerequisite for that is you have to be actually implementing this work, is okay, we're going to spend 3 months honing in your skills as a coach, as a speaker,
Mm.
as a programmer, because now you're actually implementing this stuff. And Thomas, once you're actually doing it, that's where all the really good questions come up.
Yeah. So, listening to your conversation so far, you mentioned I think you still do one-on-one coaching with athletes, right? Yeah. Is that
Yeah,
what you were
did
doing
one
today?
45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I
Yep.
watched a lot of your videos, and it's you. I mean, you're working with a medicine ball, working on catching or activities, kind of
Mhm.
upper body activities. Can
Yeah.
you just? I mean, I found the videos really inspiring. But how do you get from kind of a sedate lifestyle, video games, and where I tend to, where I would naturally go, and even
Yeah.
more so, I have a child who is on the spectrum, and that's just a habit.
Mhm.
Once they get in a habit that's comfortable, they don't want to break out of that habit, and usually that's in front of a screen or doing something, like sedate. So how do you start to
Yep.
develop habits in your videos where these athletes are really changing their daily routines?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good question. So I'll give you a fresh baked example because it happened half an hour ago during my last session. So my athlete who I'm working with is not highly motivated. Once he's engaged in the exercise, he will complete it. But to get him to transition over from sitting and literally he's watching the same cartoons on YouTube during his break, and he's sitting there. He has his phone watching YouTube, and he has his piece of comfort clay in sometimes it's green, sometimes it's purple, but it's always there. Clay in his other hand. So the strategy that we build around this, you have to take an individual centered approach to that, and that's easy to say. But then, what does that actually look, sound, and operate as? So for him, I set a timer. So that's his break timer. I say, all right, well, for the next 35, 45 seconds, do whatever you want, within reason. And he's going to sit there and chill out with his
Nice.
YouTube. And then it's okay. The timer went off. So over time, it becomes implied. All right, timer went off. Break is done. And initially, it may take him another 30 or 45 seconds to get up, to re-engage with the exercise. And over time, we want to start closing out that gap also of, okay, you can have a 30-second break. And that break, and this is something I just did a video on last night. The break for a lot of our athletes is not even necessarily physiological. It's not that they need the break because they need the physiological recovery time because the exercise was so strenuous. sometimes that happens, but usually it's the case that they need to self-regulate and that they need to kind of mentally, emotionally recuperate from the fact that they were in a demanding situation for the last, minute and a half.
Yeah.
So the general strategy is, the overarching mantra of it is meet the athlete where they are at right now. And sometimes the exercises themselves take a back seat to getting the athlete focused and lowering anxiety and making sure that they feel comfortable in the situation. That doesn't mean the exercises change. Going to use completely different exercises with one athlete that we're going to use with another. It means that the way that we implement the exercises may change based on what their adaptive profile is like. So how motivated and how engaged they are.
I love that you were just there an hour ago doing this and helping this, athlete with autism do that. We are getting quite a few people connecting online. So if people want to check in, leave say hi, just let us know you're here. That's awesome. And also, if you have a question for Eric, please put the question in the chat too, and we'll answer those from the chat. So what was your inspiration to 20 years ago to continue in this? There's got to be an easier way to be a trainer than choose this path, but yet here you are.
I think the one big question was, how is nobody doing this? If you want the why, that's the why, is how is it's so important for any population. And then you look at the neuroadaptive space and the question, and it, to me, coming in, and I have a certain amount of bias because it's, this is my lifestyle. After I'm done today, I've another session this afternoon. I'm going to go home to my garage gym and I'm going to train. That is what I'm going to do, because that's a big part of my day to day. Is I want it's not, I need to get my training. It's, I go get to train in the garage gym, that my wife and I, mostly my wife, built. And that to me is, a privilege, and it's something that comes along with my existence too. I build that time out for myself. For me, it's how can we talk about optimal development, and how can we talk about quality of life for this population if fitness is not part of that conversation? And I think one of the big changes that I've seen, we can come back to the idea or the notion of culture. One of the things that I have found has changed a lot since I started, because some of the conversations that I had with people when I first started out, I will say the conversations for me kind of sucked, but it was, well, why is fitness important for this population? And that was kind of the Stone Age years of applied behavior analysis, where it was a lot of discrete trial, and it was a lot of, okay, well, once they do this puzzle, we're going to do another puzzle. And then, we did 2 puzzles, let's do another puzzle. And then it was this idea of, one day they'll, have a job where they're just putting widgets together. And then automation came along. And I think there was a large section of time between like the late 90s and early aughts where the whole idea was, okay, academics, but not thinking about what is adulthood actually going to be like. And then what I've seen is a big shift. I would say, if I had to pinpoint it, probably around like 2015, 2016 or so. I'm just kind of guesstimating here. Of, we need to work on life skills, and we need to work on quality of life, because a lot of the individuals who are now diagnosed at 4, 5, 6 years old, well, now they're 19, 20, 21. And what are they going to do? And I think that was a light bulb moment for a lot of people, and not necessarily in a good way, of saying, we've prepared for one thing, but we need to do another. And if we're looking at overall quality of life, not just in early years, but into adulthood, teen and adulthood, then we have to say, how is fitness and healthy living not part of this equation? How do we justifiably say, yeah, this isn't important, or it's too hard, or this is too challenging, or they don't want to do it? Because all of those are easy things to say, and their truth notwithstanding. Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, the motivation isn't going to be there, but are we going to deny someone the capability of getting stronger, moving better, and having that quality of life, even talking about injury prevention and independence, because we either have a paucity or a lack of information, which is what I've been doing through Autism Fitness, is creating that information stream? Or are we going to say, well, it's too hard, so we're not going to do it? Like, which of those seems like, okay, this is a viable, okay, this is cool, we're okay with this?
Yeah. So a lot of people listening right now, either live or watching on YouTube later or LinkedIn later, probably can't make it to Charlotte. I think that's where you're located, right? And a lot of us probably have autistic children on the spectrum, or know somebody who's autistic. What should we do? Can you help us, or what's our next step?
Yeah, well, that's a great segue into the conversation about the certification also. And the reason I created it was, when you have a methodology and you have information, for me, it was, okay, great, I have a full roster of athletes in New York. Okay, good. And then, we relocated down here to Charlotte 3 years ago. It's all right. I'll build a whole roster here. But with the certification, it's how there are people who are dedicated and capable elsewhere in the world. How do I put together the information? How do I structure this in a way where it becomes meaningful and useful and replicable for people also? So for parents, there are two options. It's, finding a certified, actually three options: finding a certified pro in your area. And if you reach out to me, I have a list, and I'm also working on a new page that's going to be searchable, so people can find a certified pro in their area. Then I learned this early on with the certification, there are some extremely dedicated parents out there who are willing to go and get the certification, which now is available. The certification is two parts. So there's the self-paced online course, and then I do a live practical, and that's either virtually through Zoom, or I also have live hands-on dates as well this year. But I've had parents fly. I had a couple fly from Brazil to Connecticut at one point to do the certification. Wow. I had a mother fly from Montana to the East Coast. I've had people I had a group of occupational therapists fly from Hawaii to St. Louis for a seminar. I'm like, I'll do one in Hawaii. It's fine.
Maybe go the other way. Yeah.
I'll come on. Come on over. So parents, if you want to run, and if you say, I just want to run this program for my child or my teen, then parents go through the course and they get all that as well. And the third, the reason I bring up the third is, if you don't have an Autism Fitness certified pro in your area, but someone who, this would be a great fit for them. I know this therapist, or I know this trainer, then, sharing the information with them, because they may not know it exists. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they have this niche that is really suitable for their skill set as well.
Wow. It seems like a great opportunity for, if somebody wanted to raise, do a fundraiser or whatever, to send somebody to your training in their area, that might be a good way for parents to get together and do that too. So
yeah,
we do have a question from Nadir. He says, I don't know if you can see it there. Hello, Eric. There's such an interesting topic. I was wondering, in your experience, do you find handling groups more challenging than one-on-one programs?
Yeah, groups are always going to be more challenging. Groups are going to be more challenging regardless of whether you have neurotypical or neuroadaptive individuals. So the methodology that I developed is called the PAC profile. So it's PAC. It's physical, adaptive, and cognitive. And the reason I developed it was we're always looking at those three levels of skill, or those three ability levels, because they're going to tell us what we need to know in order to do what we need to do. So physically, we're looking at what level can this athlete currently perform this squat or press or medicine ball throw, because that's going to dictate for us what level of challenge, either progress it or modify it, and that's going to make it relevant for and accessible for that athlete. And then we have the adaptive, right? So the adaptive is behavioral, motivation, and engagement. And then we have the cognitive, which is kinesthetic awareness, and also cognitive in terms of understanding information and being able to either verbalize or otherwise communicate it too. So when you have a group, the reason I bring up the pack profile now is when you have a group, now you have 2 or more pack profiles, and what we want is compatibility, because the one thing that I will say is that I'm always going to be realistic about what is going on and what the outcomes are going to be, rather than say, hey, we can take a group of 25 or 30. We can, but it's going to be a mess. There's no way around it being a mess. You can take the greatest practitioner on the face of the planet, whatever that means. It's going to be a mess because you have all of these competing variables. In a neurotypical group fitness program, most people are motivated, even if they're going to complain their whole damn way through, 45 minutes of metabolic training or strength training, whatever it is. But with a group of individuals who are neuroadaptive, you might have one individual who really does need that one-to-one attention, but because it's in a group situation, or they might be getting overwhelmed, or you might have someone who is wandering off. So the groups, can they work? Yes, but there have to be some very specific constraints around them. And I never want to give someone a false idea of what is possible. It's not like, oh, just bring us, everybody, because if you do have considerable behaviors that need some type of either intervention, or those behaviors also are something that we are going to be very considerate of during the session. Well, is that taking away from the experience of another individual who's highly motivated? So you look at that and you have to say, what's your hierarchy here? What is the most important thing? Because often with groups, people ask about socialization, and I can go on and on about this topic too, but ultimately, here's the question. What is the most important thing for us to do right now? Is it be fit and active and actually get the exercises done? Or is it socialization? And here's the other thing, because it keeps going. If it's socialization, like what are we categorizing as socialization here? Is everyone standing around having a conversation? Because that means that fitness is probably not happening at a level that's going to yield a training effect for our athletes. So I think that we have these terms that we just kind of throw out. It's like, oh, well, what about socialization? It might happen, but that's definitely not it might happen as a result of, but it's not my primary focus. So to answer Nadir, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, to answer your question, it's the answer is yes. Groups are definitely going to be more challenging, but in the adapted PE space, most of the time, adapted PE teachers are going to be teaching a group. So you need to find the most viable and effective way to do it as well. And we cover a lot of that in the level 1 certification, because there's so much information that needs to be understood and then applied to those different scenarios.
Yeah, I really am more inspired by you every time we talk, and watching the work you're doing through your videos and through your company is really amazing. So, I saw in a lot of the videos you're in a gym environment, working with the medicine balls and stuff. Is there any danger to the athletes? We're all in a different place as we in the autism. Or the staff in the gym, how do you manage? And just the noise, I'm thinking the machines. For my child, that would be very distracting.
The environment is so crucial. It really is. And when we moved down here. So when I was in New York, I was operating out of a facility that was dedicated to different programs, day hab and different types of art and music and life skill programs for the neuroadaptive population. So there, it was definitely a very safe space for everybody. And then when we moved down here, I needed to find a facility that, number one, had enough open space. Number two, wasn't packed. Number three, didn't have crazy acoustics, like, a lot of bass and music just pumping. And
Yeah.
four, had people who understood and appreciated what I was doing. I don't need a high five from everybody, but just a basic, okay, I get what's going on. Fortunately, I found a space, a gym, Metro Fitness here in the Charlotte area, that has really embraced my programming and is very supportive of what I'm doing down here. Now, that being said, there are people doing power cleans. There are people squatting in racks. There are machines around. So it's an extra layer of safety consideration that I need to take. I think it's a good time to also talk about inclusive fitness, which is the program of which I am the executive director of programming and innovation. That's up in Boston. So we've developed, and I believe I introduced you to Greg Austin, who's the founder and CEO, who would be a phenomenal guest for you as well. We've designed that space specifically for and around the needs of the autism and neuroadaptive population. That's something that we plan on continuing to grow as well. Okay. So the environment plays a crucial aspect, because this is not the sort of thing where I say, okay, you have this gym net, like this big box gym. Great. It's a perfect environment to run programming, because it might be for 2 athletes, but the other 7 are completely overwhelmed and it presents a safety hazard. And you have to consider everybody. I don't want to march into some place and say, hey, I'm working with the neuroadaptive population. Everybody clear out of my way. And I don't want that special treatment. I really don't. If we look at, so one of my major missions, and I think this coincides with yours as well, is to elevate the level of respect that we have as a society for individuals who are neuroadaptive. And part of that, do we sometimes need different treatment and some extra consideration? Yeah, 100%. And I can always appreciate that. But I am never going to walk into a place and say, hey, we need to shut down right now so that my athlete can do medicine ball throws, because they're a member of the community. They're a member of society. We have to we have to coexist together also. And that's going to take some learning and education on the part of the neurotypical community. And guess what? It's going to take something on the part of the neuroadaptive community too, because you have to learn how to engage in society.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, but the company I founded, the Autism Staffing Group, I think my highest ideal is just that we're all better the more diverse we are. So if you're an organization, you should have gender diversity, you should have racial diversity, you should have neurodivergent diversity, and the company is inherently better by being more diverse. So I think that's kind of what you're saying too, is that if we try to do fitness, the gym, everything, by considering neurodiversity in their mission statement of their gym, I think it's going to make the gym better in ways they might not even expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it changes, it changes not just the way that we look at things, but it also, it's a behavioral change. And I think that both kind of philosophically and practically, sometimes you say, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, or that makes no sense whatsoever. I would love to be a part of a society where someone doesn't just laud my work with this population, say, oh, Autism Fitness, that's awesome, but really looks at my programming and says, whether or not they think it's any good. Like, I would love to be judged on the merit and say, okay, and have a debate with someone around programming I don't get to do that, Thomas, because and it's not that I'm not grateful for it, but just because here's, I guess, the standard that I want to create. Just because I or anybody else is doing fitness or coaching fitness for this population doesn't automatically make it good programming. I want to run good programming because I'm a good programmer and I know how to coach, not just because it's not this automatic
Gold
magical
star, I
thing. Like
guess.
this is, it's not alchemy. It's not like, well, you're working with the population, so you must be good at it. No. Absolutely not. If you're a good coach and you know how to program and you know how to look at someone's squat pattern or press pattern or whatever it is and say, okay, we need to do this, this, and this so it actually looks good. All right, now we're talking here. But that, that's part of elevating the standard to not just, oh, isn't this great? Clap, 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 clap. It's like, oh, okay, that looks like a really good hinge pattern. That looks like a really good, hurdle step pattern. Oh, that, there's some deviation here. And not to say there isn't a lot more to it. There is, but I'd love to get to that point where I could, sit down and say, all right, well, this is my methodology for just from a strict exercise perspective that, these are the tenets behind my practice and why I program the way that I do.
Well, Eric, we do have a pretty good number of people listening in. So any final questions, put that in the chat. But from you, I guess we're already almost at time.
I talk a lot.
What's next? How anything else you want to add? How do people join in? Where do we leave this? And I'm guessing a lot of us who joined in probably either are autistic or have autistic people we know, or in our family or our children. Or we want to bring this to our community. We're jealous because you're doing it in Boston and Charlotte, but where are you going to leave us? What are our next steps?
Yeah, the next steps depend on where you want to go. And I don't mean that like prophetically. I mean, if you're interested in getting certified, you can go to autismfitness.com and download the, all of the course material, the course syllabus. As I mentioned, the course is worldwide. So whether you are in Shanghai or Saskatchewan or Seattle or any other place that starts with an S, you can be a part of the level 1 certification. If a lot of parents want this work in their schools also, they'll take it to a school executive or a director and say, hey, are the adapted PE coaches doing this? Are they certified? So that's another way. And then of course there are parents who want to take it upon themselves and say, look, I'm getting some sand bells, I'm getting some medicine balls, getting some cones. We're doing this at home. And what I love about that also is for many parents, they have that opportunity to have maybe not the first or second session, but to have something click, with their son or their daughter, of any age or ability level too. And then if, you want to keep watching me talk and do stuff, my YouTube, the Autism Fitness, I put up a Tuesday training video every week. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And for people who are interested in having me come and speak or train staff, you can reach out to me on any of those channels.
Well, that's great. I like when we talked initially, you mentioned about, usually it takes 4 sessions before, somebody with autism can start to be comfortable in a situation. So for those starting out and wanting to be involved, I think that's good advice. Just let's stick to it for a while before we give up on this too quickly.
Oh yeah. Ultimately, I don't have a magic wand. I have consistency. That's what I have. And would do the same things in the right way over and over and over. And that's, it's any good training. Eventually we're going to have a beneficial effect.
Love it. Okay, Eric, thank you so much. Hopefully this is beneficial. I know a lot of people are going to watch this on LinkedIn later. So hopefully they're reaching out to you, and I'm really excited to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you.